So here in part one of my book, Holy Cow, You're Retiring, we're going to discuss the two biggest blind spots retirees have as they move into those years where they're going to create an income from their investments. And again, the three parts of the book. We're about to do part one, which is learn about those blind spots. In part two, we'll talk about three different withdrawal strategies or ways of getting income from your investments that adjust for these blind spots. And in part three, we'll discuss one of the more important things about your journey, which is how to navigate fluctuating financial markets. I think it'll be good for us to revisit our goal here, which is to create a plan for never beginning to run out of money, not just never running out of money. It's a higher bar for sure, but one definitely worth aiming for. Okay, so here's your first blind spot. It's revealed by how you answer this question. How many years of retirement income will you need? Well, that depends obviously on how long you're going to live. And I'm here to tell you, you're going to live longer than you probably think. Let me share a statistic with you. The average age of retirement in this country is 62. So you see that on our chalkboard here. Well, where is 92 coming from? Well, that's not life expectancy for an individual. However, it is the life expectancy of a married, non-smoking couple that has reached age 65. So what that means is if you're part of that couple that's 65 and doesn't smoke, there's a high likelihood one of you will still be alive at age 92. So using that as our guide, this says that you're going to need to plan for 30 years of income in retirement. That's almost as long as you were working. So that's a heck of a retirement challenge, and we need to take that seriously. So looking at retirement planning and adjusting for this first blind spot, you need to plan for at least 30 years of needing income from your investments during your retirement. Now let's take a look at blind spot number 2. And it is revealed by how you answer this question. How much income will you need each year? At first, this seems pretty simple because you'll work on a budget. You'll have an understanding of what your retirement might cost. But there's one factor that's always true, and I think one of my favorite authors in the financial services industry said it best. Each year, everything that you need to buy will cost more than it did the year before. And what he's talking about here is inflation. Inflation plays a big part in retirement, and we need to factor that in as we're looking at these 30-year retirements, because as inflation goes, the longer you need an income, the bigger of a role it's going to play in your plan. So I've made it really simple. When we look at inflation, I've gone back and I looked at what's the average rate of inflation for the last century, and it turns out it was 3.37%. The way to figure out how much income you're going to need is to apply that rate of inflation to your annual budget each and every year. So it would really be just using this simple formula to figure out how much you'll need. Just kidding. You don't need to use this formula. You could, but I've simplified it for you. We just talked about in blind spot number 1 that you're going to need to provide yourself an income for 30 years during retirement. So instead of looking what each and every year will cost, let's take a look at what each decade will cost. So the first decade, you can see I've used this multiplier of 1 times. The first decade will cost about what you expect it will. You know what your budget is. Each year things will go up a little bit, but you won't really start to feel the full effect of inflation until that second decade. Your second decade of retirement is going to cost 1.5 times what the first decade cost, 50% more. And hold on to your hats, because the third decade is going to cost twice as much as that first decade. So you're going to need to create a withdrawal strategy that can provide you with twice as much income in the third decade of your retirement as it does in the first decade of retirement. Now, if you're starting to feel like, I might be going into a financial freefall in retirement, the good news is, in part 2 of this book, I will share with you a withdrawal strategy that is designed to tackle this challenge of inflation and keep you on a comfortable path during your retirement. So to review, blind spot number 2 is underestimating the impact of inflation during retirement. To summarize, now you know the 2 biggest blind spots in planning for an income during retirement. The first is you need to plan for at least 30 years of needing an income in retirement. And the second is to be able to create a strategy that will allow you to double the income you're paying yourself in retirement to keep up with rising living costs. So next up in part 2, we'll talk about how to create a withdrawal strategy that adjusts for these two blind spots.